Hello and welcome to the Adulting Well podcast. I am your co-host Joshua, and I am joined, as always, by the amazing Kevin. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing well, Joshua. Thanks for asking. So our guest tonight is Amy Miller. She was one of Comedy Central's Up Next comics for 2018 and was a breakout favorite in season 9 of The Last Comic Standing, which is a fantastic show. Her Comedy Central Presents set has had over 3 million views on YouTube.
Dang.
Yeah, I know. That's fucking awesome. She was also featured comic on Viceland's Flophouse. On Last Comic Standing, Keenan Ivory Wayne said that she had one of the fiercest jokes he'd ever heard, which I actually agree with. You have some fierce jokes. Originally from the East Bay, Amy found her comedy chops in Oakland and is still a regular at SF Punchline and Cobb's Comedy Club, two of our local faves. Her material is personal, political, and 100% authentic. The laugh button says she found widely creative way to find empowerment while simultaneously sparking laughter. And Courting Comedy says Miller juxtaposes an unassuming demeanor with unflinching assurance. After I moved to Portland in 2012, Amy quickly rose to the top of the Pacific Northwest comedy scene, winning Portland's Funniest in Helium's 2015 contest, as well as being voted Portland's Funniest Comedian for 2013 and 2015 in the Willamette Week, a rag that I love. She was the first woman to win each position and the only one to win all three. Amy's debut album Solid Gold is available on Kill Rock Stars, which we love as well, and was named one of the top 10 comedy albums of 2016 by Interrobang. You may have seen her on Viceland. You've been on Sirius XM, NPR, Doug Loves Movies, The Adam Carolla Show, all the good stuff. Bennington Show, Put Your Hands Together, All Fantasy Everything, Keith and the Girl, your own podcast, Who's Your God? Amy's nationally touring festival and comedy club headliner. She has also performed in the Bridgetown Comedy Festival, South by Southwest, which I go to every year. And I think I saw you actually one year. The High Plains Comedy Fest, Laughing Skull, Big Sky, San Francisco Sketchfest, and the Bumbershoot Festival, among many others. So I know that, I have watched many of your sets, both on YouTube, and I do believe I've seen you.
Wait, should I talk now?
And I can agree with all the... Yes. Welcome.
No. Guests don't talk on this show.
I just realized I hadn't said anything yet, and I feel like a real asshole sending you that long bio. But then also, it's nice
It helps set it up, though.
It's nice to revisit when I was allowed to do comedy and remember that I have done it before and that life used to be different. So I kind of like hearing all of it, but I also now know it's way too long. I'll pare it down a little bit next time.
Well, I enjoyed reading it because it actually, when Julie first sent it to me, Julie is our amazing marketing director, I was like, oh, I've seen her at South by Southwest, because when I watched the videos, I was like, she seems so familiar. And then I kind of like put it together. So welcome to the show. Thank you. We were talking about long podcasts before this, and it had me think. Yeah, it had me thinking about some of the podcasts I've been listening to lately that are coming in at like 2 hours, and I make it through about 15 minutes and fall asleep.
Oh, really? I like when mine are long. I just don't like doing long podcasts.
Right.
I like listening to long podcasts.
Well, it's hard if you know what you're going into, it's going to be 2 hours, then it's like, I don't know, is this worth it?
Sure.
But sometimes it just goes that way.
I think like anything, like 45 minutes is the longest anything should be.
Yeah, I mean, my podcast is about religion, so it does go long sometimes because people have a lot of feelings about that. I'm sure you guys are aware. But we try to keep
a few. I've seen a few on the social medias. So tell us, most of the people we interview, and you've got a live record or a record out on Kill Rock Stars. So I would assume that there's some punk rock background here. Most people we talk to have been involved in the punk scene or have done things that are incredibly independent. And I think that intersects well with the comedy world. So maybe just talk a little bit about like your early life and how you kind of came to do comedy and like what that sort of was like for you. And I know that's probably a long story, but just whatever you feel like sort of filling in for us, because I'd love to hear about your early life.
Yeah, so just starting with the Kill Rock Stars thing, that was really cool. They have a small but excellent stable of comedians, and I know even now that they like Portia left and Slim took the label back over, that they're trying to expand that even further. And that was very cool. It was a very good kind of exclamation point on the end of my 3 years in Portland. I lived there for 3 years, really moved there for comedy, but I worked in music, which is funny enough. And yeah, so getting that, I think it was after my going away show that Portia, who was running Kill Rock Stars, came up to me after and said, like, want to do a deal? And I'm like, yes. It's like, it was so exciting. So I've lived a lot in the music world, and as far as like my punk background, I mean, it's kind of funny because I have a religion podcast because I raised myself in the Baptist church, which you can hear all about if you go to Who's Your God. But at the time, I was living in the East Bay. My parents were not religious, and my brother was, a huge part of the founding of Gilman Street, and he's the lead singer in a band called Sam I Am, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And so it was funny. It was like at this time I was like, it's the mid 80s to late 80s, and I'm a super Christian child. And then my brother's doing basically what my pastors are telling me is the devil's music.
Can we just pause there for a second? Are you saying your parents were not religious?
They were not religious. Yeah, I mean, we were just like sort of white trash, chaotic household. And my parents were drunks, and like
you just decided to be a Christian?
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. My sister and I.
What?
And again, like I've talked about this so many times on the pod. But the abbreviated version is we lived a block away from a very fundamentalist Baptist church, and we did not have really much parenting. And they brought this van around that said, I'll take your kids to church on Sunday. And my dad was like, that's perfect, because that's when football is on. So strange man in a van, please take my daughters. So two sisters and I started going to church, but then our oldest sister immediately was like, fuck this, because she was cool like my brother. And she got out, but we stuck with it, and we just went on our own. We would walk there or have the van pick us up, and then it really spiraled, because then I was Christian for like 25 years, and my sister a little bit longer. But yeah, at that time, when I was very little, I had this idea of like whatever my brother is doing every night, which is riding his bike to Gilman, an incredibly long way, by the way, because we lived in El Sobrani, so he's like riding his bike past like the San Pablo Reservoir through the hills. I'm sure there were a lot of drugs involved, and that's fine. But to go to Berkeley, and then then slowly became this sort of thing that was like a pretty well-known band. And I mean, I would go on to I didn't start doing comedy until I was 30, so it would be so many years before I started performing. And now it's really funny because we're like, should we just, if life goes back to normal, do we need like an Amy Miller and Sam I Am tour? Because I feel like people would love that. And looking back, my favorite part of it is that, Sam I Am songs are often about our family and the darkest parts of our family history. And I remember as a teenager being like so embarrassed, like, I can't believe you're airing all this dirty laundry, and like everybody knows our business. And now I'm just like on national television talking shit about my dead father or whatever. So it runs in the family. And our two sisters are normal, nice people. They're like a teacher and a nonprofit worker. Like they don't perform, but yeah, it's pretty funty that like just how much I hated it that he was, telling our secrets. And now it's like, whatever. I have no boundaries.
Well, so Jason was on the show a couple weeks ago, right?
No, I didn't. That's so funny. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Julie didn't tell me that. Oh, by the
So
way, I'm
I'm
good old friends with Julie Shuchard, your marketing director, and she's so lovely.
yeah,
She's amazing.
she's amazing. So we interviewed Bill and him and Mark about the Golden Bowl.
Oh, nice.
And just surviving COVID, you know. So
Yeah.
And one of my first shows when I was a kid was Isocracy at the Oddfellows Temple in Santa Rosa. And
That's
like,
amazing.
who knows whenever they were a band, but they threw trash all over when we had put on the show. So we had to stay and pick up all their trash. So I got to remind him of that in the podcast a couple weeks ago.
That's so great. So, yeah, there's a very Oh, sorry. I think we have a little bit of a delay. I'm not blatantly interrupting you. There's
Keep interrupting.
It's a very funny picture of me on the first day of school, and I want to say like 1985, where I'm wearing like I look for sure neglected, like my hair is dirty, and I'm wearing like an acid wash jean skirt, but then I have an Isocracy t-shirt, and I went to Christian school. I went to school at the church where I started going to church, and they did not take kindly to me wearing that. And I just thought, I was like, it's the first day of school. You want to wear your most special outfit. Like, my brother has a band. It was a very innocent shirt at that time. Their graphics were all like little woodland creatures, you know, it was like just little drawings of animals. It was very innocent. But they knew somehow like, oh, that's like a secular punk band. And they told me I could never wear it to school again. I had to go home and change. Crazy. I'd kill for that shirt now, though. Like, so cool.
But it does sound like it was a good thing in your life that they were there at that moment.
Yeah, yes and no. I've only come to that realization more recently in my life, because I mean, my sister and I really clung to it because there were adults there that took an interest in us. And, you know, my brother really was responsible for raising me most of the time. And as you've heard, you know, maybe he wasn't the best person for that job either, but he was a fucking kid and he was in a band. And so it's like he did so much, you know, he's more my father than my father ever was, which is really weird now because we're like peers and friends, and it's, you know, it's an interesting change in the dynamic. But yes, I think that we had kind of these adults that looked out for us and made sure we kind of had what we needed, and we had activities and like friends, like went to summer camp, you know, we went to Wednesday night Bible study. Like, that was all huge. Do I wish that I had a situation as a kid where I had actual activities? You know what I mean? Like, my parents would sign me up for soccer or whatever. Yeah, of course. But that's just not, those aren't the cards I was dealt. So if church is what I got, then, you know, it's what I got. I think ultimately it resulted in a lot of good things.
It could have been a biker gang.
Or it could have been just what my brother and sister did, which was like just do drugs and drop out of high school, you know, which is also fine. Kids, for the kids listening, school is a scam. No. I'm like grateful for it, but I also, of course, am very scarred from it and still working that out. And that's why I have 170 episodes of a podcast about religion.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting too. I'm utterly obsessed on cults, and especially the modern day, like, social media transformation of people with QAnon and the other like extremely hard, like, right fantasy land that's going on right now. And I'm actually, I didn't even know about your podcast, and I'm going to probably subscribe to it as soon as we're done, because it's right in my wheelhouse. Like, and I find that material too to be incredibly compelling for people that have sort of been able to get out and you know, use it as a form of creating and artistry. And, you know, I'm sure, and I've watched a bunch of, because Julie wanted you to come on the show, and so I watched a bunch of your the stuff that I could find on video, I mean, your comedy is biting, and it's also really real. And those are the comedians that I like the most. And I try to get to at least one comedy show at South by Southwest when I'm there. I go to SketchFest at least to one every, at least one event every year. And I absolutely love, more than anything else, Mortified. I think it's fucking brilliant. So, when I started watching and doing research on your comedy, I mean, like I said, I recognized you, but I also was like, God, this is the kind of stuff I really like, because it's honest. And, you burned some dude in Portland when you were doing, you were opening for somebody's, live show that they were filming, and some guy was trying to heckle you, but then stopped, and you said, "Oh, are you a white dude with a beard?" And I was like, "Oh shit, should I shave before the show?"
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Like I'm at this really weird point right now where, like, in 2 weeks I turn 40, which to me in normal life is very normal and fine. And I'm not dead. But in LA, in the entertainment business, I've gotten advice from so many people that are saying, like, don't say that out loud. Just hide it. Like, you don't look your age, so just lie. And I'm like, whatever happened during those formative years, that I wasn't involved in the punk scene, but I absorbed a lot of that approach, and a lot of that is honesty, so it feels really weird to be in a job where I'm like, I will say anything about my life and my past, and it's all based in reality. Not that I don't write good jokes. I think I do, but I'm not like a one-liner comic. Like, it's mostly autobiographical.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels weird all of a sudden to just have this big thing that I lie about to get jobs. And I think, I think my brother had a huge influence on me, but I also think it's a lot of, like, there's this thing that I don't always know how to talk about, but there's like white trash pride, like, not white pride. That's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
But white trash pride,
sure.
where that runs through my entire family, that it's like, you can't fucking tell us what to do. And maybe we behave in a way that's detrimental to our bank account and future hireability, but it's always something we can be proud of. You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing stuff that's real and honest. And I got so much of that from my brother, and like, which I don't even know if I've ever told him or given him personally credit for this, but it really is my whole family. I mean, my sisters are normal people, and they're the same way. That it's just like, I'm gonna behave in a way that's true to, like, my core values and who I am, and be proud of where I came from. And, like, so yeah, it feels so weird to be like, I'm 34. Like, what? Who fucking cares?
Yeah.
And well, you can start with this episode if you listen to the podcast, but we had Bobcat on, and we were talking a lot about this, like, what is that, like, poor people thing, where when you get into entertainment or whatever, you just don't take any shit from anybody. And, Bobcat is such a great example because he's a genius. Like, he's truly a genius. He's an amazing director, comedian, everything. And he's lost so much work just from wanting to be authentic and standing up for what he believes and not wanting to work for assholes. And so we talk a lot about that in his episode, just what is that thing. And I think it's all very punk mentality, like, I'll do it on my own. I don't need a gatekeeper to tell me that I'm good or that I'm doing it well. And the compromise is you might not end up rich, but you can be proud of yourself at the end of the day. And I mean, that's true for my brother and I both. And I mean, Bobcat's got plenty of money. He's doing fine, but he should be much wealthier than he is.
I agree with that. I saw him at Sketchfest one year. In fact, who was in that show? Mark Maron was actually on that show before he hit it big with his podcast. And Matt Nathanson actually played music and performed in that show. And it was Bobcat absolutely blew me away. I had not seen him perform live before. And
Oh,
so,
really?
yeah, so most of what I knew about him was from earlier days. Shakes the Clown is one of my all-time favorite
Oh,
movies.
yeah.
And I've probably watched it 100 times. We used to get high when I was younger and just watch it and laugh and just eat food. And,
I saw him a few years ago. It was great.
he's fantastic. He is a genius.
There was no
Truly.
one there. It just sucked, but it was like
Really?
he was great. Yeah, it was a weird like early Wednesday night thing that free ticket thing. He was
total
pissed.
genius. And
Yeah.
I am going to start with that episode then, because I adore him. I just think he's another one that's truly authentic. And
did you see his like Twilight Zone-ish show that he made recently?
Yeah, it's so good. The True TV show, yeah, it's very weird. I mean, that's an example of finally someone, some network being like, make what you want to make, Bobcat. And unfortunately, it's on True TV. So, like, who even knows how I think that somebody just bought all their properties. Like, I think HBO Max might have gobbled them up. So you can probably watch it there now. But,
cool.
But yeah, he's also been steeped in all this tragedy. It's like every creative person he was close to died younger than they should have. And he's just so good at doing things that he wants to do, and not just always like taking that check. And I haven't listened to my brother's episode of your podcast. I wish I had known, but the Golden Bull is a really funny thing because he's wanted to own a bar in the East Bay for so long. And this is the kind of shit that happens, that you finally get the thing you want, and then life has another, and then there's a pandemic and you're like, great, all this thing.
Right.
And what I think we're always prepared for is disappointment and survival. And that's what you get from like a poor, chaotic childhood, is that you're like, of course this would fall apart, and then what's the next thing that I'm going to do? And when you know that you're always making choices that are true to you and that you feel like are right, then you're always going to be, you're not going to be rich, but you're always going to be able to sleep at night knowing that you're like making good choices. And it's so fucked up that this happened to him, whatever. He's should have had his own bar decades ago, but that's also the business that we're both kind of in now, where it's like we're always chasing this, we want to perform and that's it. And
Sure.
And so it's just been wild to have him be in a spot where now he's like dad full time, and that's what we're doing this year, because the bar can't be open and you can't tour. And so, we're all kind of re-examining like, what is my identity? Yeah, it's been wild. I miss him. I haven't seen him since March. So what if I just started weeping about my brother?
Oh, that'd be great. We'll use that for the promo clip.
I did last week, so don't, we're wide open to whatever here.
Kevin cries all the time on the show.
I've had 2 cries in the last 2 shows.
Oh, I love it.
I'm not. I got no shame in my game.
You cried on his episode?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I gotta see that.
Not on his. I cried on Jane Kim's episode and on Terry's episode. Terry, a friend of mine, Terry Samandra, was just on, and she's a filmmaker, and she just did this like amazing ghost story film shot in India that's on Netflix. So I have a very, very troubled past. So when you talk about like white trash pride, I'm like, okay, this is my people.
That gets me too. That really got me because I like one side of my family, the one I raised with, comes from a very poor rural area of Illinois. And I didn't grow up, like I didn't go to college and stuff. And now I work in tech, so I'm surrounded by all these people that have degrees and all this stuff. And I have this kind of imposter syndrome chip on my shoulder all the time that gets in my way, as you said, Amy, all the time, because we're totally down to cut off our noses to spite our face for some reason.
Yeah, and I worked in tech for years in San Francisco, and when I left, I had already started doing comedy. And so I deleted my LinkedIn, and I was like, I'm just doing this because I don't ever want to do a job again that requires it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so a couple times in the last 5 years, some like comedy opportunity has asked for it. And I'm like, no, I don't, I can send you a resume, but I don't have a LinkedIn. Like I worked for such terrible people in tech and the same, like I ended up making all these friends, many of whom I'm still friends with that I love dearly, but we always have this sort of divide that they're like, they started wealthy and then they got more wealth and it's just always gonna separate us. I mean, the number of times that, I was working in SF that someone's like, let's get a fucking cabin in Tahoe or whatever, whatever it is, like some group thing. And then you're like, well, I don't have $1,000 to spend on a 2-day vacation. You know what I mean? And it's always this weird,
That's fascinating
divide.
Yeah, because there's a class solidarity starts to happen, right? Because even so I have friends that are I don't have a lot of friends in the tech industry. They're in lots of different industries. And because I'm in the tech industry, our incomes can vary vastly. And there is an uncomfortableness that comes with that, I think, where you start to, either way, feel like this is a little weird. Like the disparity is too weird here.
And even if you catch up, and even if you catch up a little, which I did, eventually I was making very good money, the most money that I've ever made, but still knew coming out of that like, oh, I was supposed to fight for more stock options. Like I was supposed to ask for raises, but I just don't know like what the standards are, you know what I mean? And I just was like, I'm so happy to have a job. And now, you learn these things slowly, but rich kids come into those opportunities prepared. And that's this exact same for comedy. And it's funny because thankfully in the last few years, there's so much conversation around diversity in comedy. And I, of course, fully support it and am always happy for it. And, any show.
Yeah, that could have been a real left turn.
Yeah, exactly. Any live show or TV show that's or podcast that's like 100% of the time all white people, like it's boring anyway. So like we're doing it for quality, but there still is not a conversation around having like blue collar people in a writing room. You know what I mean? It's like now these writers' rooms often are racially diverse or diverse around sexuality and gender, but like all those kids went Harvard. Or Tisch or whatever. And it's like, there's still, luckily, if anyone's writing a show about white trash people or something, like I do get called. So that's nice. If someone specifically has a script that they need punched up because it's about a poor family, it's another niche. But that conversation has still not been had. And I think it's for sure time for it. And I get, it's similar to the age thing. Recently I had a comedian friend tell me that I need to not like tweet about being poor. And, she said, if you project poverty, then you'll welcome poverty. And I'm like, it's an interesting point, but I don't, it's not that I don't have hope that I can still like quote unquote make it or make this a full-time job. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like 2020 was going to be the year that I paid all my bills with comedy for the first time ever. And that was taken away. And again, it's like with my brother, like you have to adapt. And I don't like make jokes about being broke to like ask for help or ask for pity. It's just a reality. And I feel like so many of my fans appreciate
very
that.
Famous comedians make jokes about being broke.
Right. Yeah. I mean, eventually they can't because they get too much money and then they sort of lose touch. But I find that like my fans have appreciated it. There's this weird thing where a lot of the time strangers think like if you're verified, if you have a blue check mark on anything, that you're a wealthy, successful comedian. And it's like, no, I don't have fucking 2 nickels right now. And that makes sense because there's just not work. But I'm trying. I want to be honest and relatable at all times. And so if I pretend otherwise, that I'm a 32-year-old rich comedian, that's going to feel bad to me,
Yeah, it kind of wrecks the honesty and the kind of genuine delivery, right? When you're, hey, I'm actually not who I say I am, like it feels like it would fizzle quite a bit. I think one of the things you're pointing out is really interesting, because I think this goes across a lot of industries that are trying really hard right now to be diverse, and where they're like really concerned about diversity from, mostly a race standpoint, and not so much around what people had access to in terms of their financial capabilities as when they were younger. And although it does go most times hand in hand in the US, I think it's an interesting point to make all the way across the board, because, one of the things we talk about a lot on the show is, how are you helping your community? Like, what are you doing to help the community that either you grew up in or you live in? And for me, I say I have a sordid past. I mean, I spent some time incarcerated, and as well as in rehabs and, other places. And so I've carved out the ability to do that for part of my living, is help people, and I think that the arts is like a really great example of an area in which people being honest and sincere, and you telling jokes that are that are autobiographical, is super helpful. Like, I felt really comfortable, even though you burned some people that I fall into the category for. I felt super comfortable listening to your comedy, because I'm like, holy shit, this is so real. This is exactly what it's like to grow up poor, and I just think it's like, people. It came up today at my house. My wife was asking if I had tried a certain food, and I was like, she goes, when you were younger, did you ever have this around the holidays? And I'm like, does it have gelatin in it? I mean, that was like, if not, probably not.
Yeah,
can
did
you
they
make
sell
it
it at
into
the
like
liquor store?
Can you make it into some molded form? If not, then probably not. But I just or is it a boiled meat product of some kind? you know and it's like those kind of jokes, when I hear them, I'm like, oh, I recognize that, and I know about that, and and so I just like, I find it really refreshing when people are honest. I think that's why, probably Shakes the Clown was such a great example. And but I do, like, I hear some people, and especially being in recovery myself, like I've been sober a really long time, I hear people in AA meetings even, like, and I'm like, God, it sounds so disingenuous when you can tell like they've come from this mighty amount of money growing up, and it's not like, it's just my judgments. But I need to hear people that are like me too. It makes the world more relatable, and it makes me, quite honestly, kinder to others that are telling their version of their lives, So I just like, I've enjoyed listening. I'm going to do more listening of your stuff and now your podcast. But I think the culmination of like how we're, especially people that grew up without a lot of money, I didn't go to college either, are like, we're drawn to things like religion. And, it's like this thing, like trying to find comfort, right? Like community, comfort. And so I'm like super curious more about how that played out for you, and what was the impetus for you leaving as well? Like, how did that happen?
Well, it was a pretty long process. I mean, I had, started kind of having some doubts when I was in high school, which I, of course, felt very guilty about, because, that's the thing about like modern evangelical Christianity, is you're not supposed to ask questions. It's not like Judaism. It's not like many other religions that encourage doubt and criticism and questioning as a means to strengthen your relationship with God, and also, increase your righteousness in a way, because you're being thoughtful about it. Like, evangelical Christianity is very much like, this is what you are required to believe, and these are the rules you're supposed to follow. And if you don't do those, then you'll fall out of grace with God, and, ultimately end up burning for eternity. So
Yeah.
it was not an easy thing to get out of, but ultimately when I was in high school, I was always a very good kid. I never got into anything bad. And partially because I was rebelling against what my parents were like, and probably to some extent what my oldest brother and sister were like, that I'm like, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to drink, and I want to get involved in, these crazy scenes or do drugs or anything. And I was, straight A student, a very good kid. And yet I constantly felt guilty. And then, senior year in high school, like I truly fell in love, like the most ideal form of teenage puppy love that you could have. And he wasn't a Christian. And of course I wanted to have sex. And then like we didn't for 3 years. What a patient boy he was. And then I ended up going to Berkeley, and he also went there. And so we continued our relationship. And then it was just like, I don't feel like this is wrong. Like at my core, I feel like, I'm old enough to have sex. I love my boyfriend. He's a very good person. I don't know why this could be like the most evil thing I could do when I've done everything else right. You know what I mean? And he never pressured me to leave my faith at all. He was very supportive. I mean, he thought it was weird because he was just like a cool, normal guy. But
Yeah.
it was just a slow process of kind of getting out of it. But I stayed Christian when I was at Berkeley for a pretty long time. And then eventually I'm like, I just don't want to go to church anymore. And then it was, I slowly kind of stopped praying. And then, over the course of many years, stopped believing and really believing like, I need to work on becoming a good person as an adult that's not based on this very limited set of rules, but is based on like how I think you should treat people, and again, a lot of it goes back to that like white trash pride where I'm like, I think I'm doing the right stuff. And so, and then, oddly, not to no surprise of anyone, one of my youth pastors at the church in Nelson Brandy where I grew up ended up he's in prison for child molestation. And so it's like this person, this one man, when I was a kid, who made me feel so guilty all the time, like I wasn't saved, and I was sinning, and now it's like he was just probably grooming a bunch of different kids, and luckily my sister and he didn't get to us, like think whoever. But it's like, well, that's so much of my guilt and my idea of morality came from this person who's absolutely evil. If there's a devil, he is of the devil. A minimum of 45 children. Like this is not, and that's just in Oklahoma. So like, who knows what the fuck he did in California? Like disgusting, horrible person. And once these things started to happen, I was like, this church was not a righteous place, and I can be more quote unquote Christ-like on my own, making decisions for myself based on my core values.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, it's really difficult for people to kind of separate, and I going through as many treatment programs as I did, the only thing I can really relate it to is like, I went through a really hardcore program that was pretty cult-like actually. And they wanted you to just like stay and be part of their community forever. And it felt very religious in some ways. And, I felt kind of guilty when I wanted to no longer associate with them, but it was definitely the best thing that I could have done for myself from a, personal growth standpoint. And I had as well a decent moral compass. I think that's why I'm so utterly like obsessed with this, like kind of cult and religion and sort of like modern day, which actually, like I mentioned Q earlier, is actually very old, same old nasty racist tropes that have been going on forever. But, it's like, it's really interesting to me, human psychology and the need to belong to something it's really powerful.
Yeah.
I've never taught, like, I don't think I've mentioned this, but I grew up in a Christian cult called The Way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And what I noticed, and it never, like, as soon as I was a teenager, I was done with all that. But what I noticed is that my family, my dad, he would go from like thing to thing. Like he's a Mormon now.
Mhm.
Like it's almost like he just needs one of those. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, we want to belong, we want community, and we also want to make sure we're ticking off all the boxes of what, you know, culturally we're supposed to have or what we're supposed to achieve. And I think, you know, those two things together can get you into a lot of shit. It can get you into cults, it can get you into church, it can get you into being a tech executive and throwing your ethics aside. You know what I mean? Like there's so many ways that we compromise, and it's not like I you know, begrudge any friends who like work for evil corporations, because we all have to work and get by. But you know, these are the things that we're always kind of navigating. It's like, what of my ethics am I willing to sacrifice to be either a part of a community or to make money, right? Because those are such valued things. To have an identity, you know, we're obsessed with identity, and not the good ways. Like like having, you know, having a label you can call yourself, like I am a comedian, or I am, you know, whatever. And it's tough. Yeah. And I think, like, you know, the punk way is just kind of being willing to sacrifice those two things for being authentic. Like I might lose some friends and I might lose some money, but I want to be true to who I am. And it's not the easiest way to live, but but it's just kind of what I know, you know?
Yeah, I think it's so what are you doing right now to kind of keep afloat? Because you obviously you can't perform live. You're doing the podcast, but I mean, based on what I know about podcasts, that's not, you know, it's not like the bank account is filling out.
What?
I mean, yeah, we luckily,
so what do you
luckily we do have some very nice and generous podcast listeners, so that is like a chunk of my income right now. But
nice.
Also, you know, Zoom shows and doing corporate online shows, and I've been doing a lot of writing, and that was a funny thing this year. Like in you know, a few months, like one of the ways that I truly stayed afloat over the last 6 months was writing for a comedian I can't name because I signed a non-disclosure agreement. But is someone who's putting out a new special, and just for those of you listening, at a certain level of fame and success, nobody writes their own jokes. They have a team. Sometimes they make people sign NDAs if they're smart. A lot of people don't, and then it comes out when the special gets panned or whatever, or people say like, "Oh, he's really lost his touch," and then it's like, "Oh, well, actually, my writers wrote," you know. So I wrote for someone I for sure do not share values with or material, and we could not be more different. His fans are mostly, you know, Trump loving, middle of the country, a lot of really religious people.
Larry the Cable Guy.
No, and I'll say no to anyone you bring up because I don't want to get sued. But also,
I know, I'm kidding.
But also, although he is face to face a very nice man, I don't want to be associated with the special. Although in a way, I am like, oh, I think it's kind of funny because I went to the taping and everything. I'm like, I think it's kind of funny that if these people found out who wrote what they're laughing at, they would be so mad. And that is a skill in its own. But was I taking a check? Absolutely. You know, I mean, I literally, like, I had to pay rent this year. And it was fun. It was a great exercise. But, you know, that's one of those moments where I'm like, I am not working for money in step with my values. But what I did was I donated 20% of what he paid me to Black Lives Matter. So, like, I don't feel great. Like,
amazing.
It's not like, and I couldn't afford that, by the way, because I don't have any work. But I just had to live with myself, you know. And of course, I didn't write any material that was offensive. I didn't write anything that I wouldn't stand by. But just who's delivering it is troubling, And, you know, I mean, these are some of the things we have to just kind of deal with. It's like, I work really, really hard to not work with or for terrible people. And he's not a terrible person, personally, as much as you can say that about
Right.
anyone who supports the Republican Party. But yeah, mostly writing, and then also writing on some great projects, and you know, and then also like for Thanksgiving, I fucking sold flower arrangements. Like I'm just hustling, doing whatever I can.
Yeah, I mean that sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to get through, right? I mean that's the good thing that we learned both from growing up in a household with punks like you did, with a, you know, father figure that was a punk. You learn to just do what you need to do, and if you don't know how to do it, you pretend you know how to do it till you learn it. And that's kind of the deal. But also growing up poor, like you get into this survival mode. I see it with my wife all the time. Like she was very poor when she was growing up, and she'll just like hustle. If there's something that needs to be done, she'll figure it out. I'll put that shelf in, you know, we're not calling anyone, you know, even though we can probably afford it now. It's just like, it's like a totally, like, it's a mindset that you are completely, it's almost impossible to get out of. So what projects can you talk about? Because we want to hear what you're up to that you can. Obviously the podcast, which I'm again pumped about. I'm gonna I already subscribed during the show. So
what's it called?
Who's Your God? And it's available everywhere. And patreon.com/Who's Your God. We have a lot of bonus content there. But I also oddly in July shot my first comedy special, which was very weird. So it comes out in February, I think early February. It's going to be on Epix. And it was very fun, very like, you know, a moment in time pandemic special. I mean, I did material that I've done before, but there was also kind of not a lot of new stuff about what's going on. And it's 20 minutes of stand up and 10 minutes of interview, during which I talk mostly about our childhood and our parents. Cool. So it's nice. It looks great. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's very funny. And like, it was just, you know, this really weird thing. We shot it outside, and the audience was masked, and everyone got tested, and they had all, you know, of course, all the protocols they have to follow. But it felt crazy to perform after not going up for, at that point, you know, 4 months. But yeah, that'll come out, and there's already a bunch of them out. If you have Epix, which I don't know who does, by the way.
I do.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There's a handful of them that came out already, and they're very, very funny. And they're shot really well, and they're all really personal. Several of the comedians cried. I didn't do that, but I knew they were trying to get me to cry, and I did not cave. But that's also because we're fucking twisted. Like, I don't, you know, if I'm talking about like dark moments from childhood, like I'm always laughing. And then the interviewer would be like, why are you laughing? Like, talking about your father's tragic death, and I'm just like, tee.
Probably made for awkward moments during the filming.
Luckily, the person interviewing me was also
like,
yeah, no, it went well. I mean, he got it, but it was just like, why are we like, we're so twisted, like it's just not right that we're laughing at all this stuff. But I'm really proud of how it came out, so you guys can watch that in February. And then I don't know, like all the writing projects I've done have pretty much been secret, so maybe when these things come out I can say something. But I worked on a friend's new show for NBC, and it's just really just hustling.
Nice.
This is the problem with talking to people in show business, is they can't talk about anything they're working on because it takes like 3 years for anything to happen.
Especially now.
People are people are also scared that their stuff is going to get taken, you know, I mean, for good reason. I mean, when you've got the music industry and the entertainment industry having stolen ideas for years and years and years, and you've got, you know, people that grew up working poor. I mean, it's like, you know, what do you expect, you know? So, I mean, I think it's interesting that, I feel like the hope for me is next year, all this creative stuff comes out and it's just completely like
bonkers because
yeah,
everyone's been inside.
totally
It's gonna be
creative, like
amazing. Yeah.
amazing, just like, you're saying like the shows were beautifully shot. Like, people are getting creative with how they're doing things. My sister-in-law was on the show last year, and she's the writer and director for Betty on HBO, and they're shooting their second season right now. And it was tough. I mean, it was hard, they had a lot of rules, and
Did they have to shut down at any point for?
She did. Yeah. She had to shut down. The staff did not, the crew did not. She did. She was quarantined for a couple weeks, and it's brutal. But I think that the show, from what she's telling me, is going to be as creative as anything she's ever done, because she said she had so much time to think about it being home, and instead of going crazy, she was channeling her energy, which it sounds like you're doing, to do stuff that she loves. And so yeah, I'll totally watch the new show. So it's coming out in February. It's on Epix.
Mm-hmm.
And then the podcast is an obvious one. And you said you've done a few other things. You're doing some Zoom performances. Is there an easy way to find that schedule, that if it's public, or is this all corporate?
A little bit of both, but I think I'm doing a big Zoom show on the 20th, but I think this won't be out yet, so I can't plug it. But
well, we can though.
Okay, perfect.
Oh yeah, we can plug it for sure.
Yeah, this coming Sunday, December 20th.
Okay.
Just like a Zoom comedy show. It's like a little holiday party for the podcast, and that'll be really fun. But yeah, it's really, I also just spend hours every day of the last couple weeks just walking around LA, and it's helped me stay sane. It's good at taking my mind off my own shit, but also simultaneously depressing, just being out there and seeing how many small businesses are closing. And, but for the most part, I'm like, I live in a place that's beautiful, and you can be outside almost every day of the year. So I'm going to take advantage of it. And that's because now, like, the industry will shut down for the next few weeks, but they always kind of start early. The emails really slow down in early December. So looking at, and by the way, like, as far as how I spend my time, like I audition a ton of voiceover and acting auditions, which are all done from home now, which is much more convenient than fucking driving to Santa Monica in rush hour, to just sit there and wait for 3 hours.
Totally.
Like, it's really changed the business in that way. But I know, like, I spend so much of my time doing that, like submitting for writing gigs and auditioning, that since it already started to slow down for the winter, I was like, I feel aimless, and like I don't know what my purpose is and what my life looks like. And looking down the next 4 weeks, I'm like, you want to go crazy because I just don't know what to do with myself. So I'm I just walk around. I just walk and walk and walk.
What neighborhood are you in?
I live
What neighborhood are you in LA?
Dead in mid city, like mid Wilshire, which is great because walking distance, I'm, in any direction, there's stuff. I mean, I live right by LACMA and the tar pits, and then, walking distance to Beverly Hills, which it's not like the coolest place to go, but I will say going to Rodeo Drive late at night, it's not technically illegal, but they make it feel illegal. Like, there's so much private security and Beverly Hills PD that are just like, we'll slow down and be like, what are you up to? And I'm like, I'm just walking. And they're like, I'm not going to rob Tiffany's or whatever. Like, I'm just walking. It was such a weird.
Well, once you get to Beverly Hills, you can get easily to West Hollywood. And it's like, it seems like there's like, once you kind of get somewhere there, like the next thing is close enough, right?
Yeah, I walked to WeHo, I walked through Koreatown, like all over the place. And then sometimes I'll drive across town and walk in a different neighborhood. But the walks through WeHo are so sad too. It's like right now, LA it feels like when you're outside, it's fully open because everything's open except for the shit I want to go to, which is like comedy and
Right.
drag shows. And like, I get it. Like, performance is something we can't do right now, but you know, the mixed messages that we get from our fucking mayors and governors and the whole administration of like, we got to shut down, but this candle store can stay open, crowded, people buying candles. And like, I don't want that place to close either, but it's like, why can't the fucking gay bars be open? You know, it's just so depressing out there. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. I just been walking.
Yeah. It's good.
Well,
it's a good thing to do.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come on today, Amy.
Oh, thank you so
Yeah, it
much
was
for having
awesome.
me. This has been really fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah. We haven't. Have we interviewed a comedian before?
No.
No. So you're our first.
I love it.
Which is amazing. And
get the whole family on. You can
so
interview our
I
sister.
will. Yeah, no, right? We should do a family one actually with you and Jason and your sisters. I would be totally. Jason's a handful, man. He was awesome on the show. He was like,
he's very funny.
He's just so.
Our entire family is really funny, and that's another thing is that you're like, oh, you know, you hear these stories about like my comedian friends who like don't want to go home for the holidays or whatever, and it's like, oh, you're from a rich family, so they're really boring. Like, no, my family's hilarious. Like Jason's one of the funniest people I know. Don't tell him I said that, but he's never gonna.
Oh, he was great.
No. We're very
Hopefully
similar.
he'll listen. He was great on the show. He was fantastic. And Sam I Am was one of my very favorite bands. Especially when they first came out, they're one of their first drummers is a guy I went to high school with. So,
oh, who was that?
They're Mark Mortensen.
Oh,
finest guy in Concord. Cool. Yeah, yeah.
Well, okay. So then you've heard the songs about me. That's troubling.
Absolutely. I'm going to revisit the catalog now too. They're a great band. They're a great band, and
they are so good.
Yeah, and you should do a tour. I will look forward to that. That will be like the highlight of 2021.
Wouldn't that be so fun? Like Amy, Kyle Kinane, and Sam I Am. Like that's a sellout, you know?
Totally. I mean, that's amazing. And I've seen bands doing comedians as their openers a lot more recently, you know?
It's very hard. You have to really have it has to be a specific kind of band and a specific kind of opener, but it's one of the more storied things in comedy that everyone says, like, don't ever open for a band. It's a fucking nightmare. And there's been some really successful pairing. I mean, Bobcat famously opened for Nirvana for years. Mm-hmm. Richard Belzer would open for Warren Zevon for years. Whenever I have tried it, it has been tricky for sure, but fun. But like, you got to have the support of the band. That's the big thing is like, you know, the lead singer has to be willing to come out and tell everybody to shut the fuck up. Otherwise it doesn't work. Yeah.
Well, it is an interesting pairing, but if
he will be willing, you know, my brother would probably physically fight anyone who heckled me. So it's a good pairing.
I could see that actually. Well, we appreciate you coming on. We do want to tell people that we are in a position where we can donate our Patreon money. So we do that. And we donate it to Hospitality House San Francisco, which provides mental health care and substance abuse counseling for individuals that are currently unhoused generally. And they also have a fantastic arts program that they've been able to cobble together during COVID with art therapy and some music therapy, as well as they have a shelter. And we're one of the first to come back as a shelter during COVID. So we love them. They're very small. Any tiny bit is literally like a delight to them. And so, you know, we just encourage people if they've got the means to do the right thing during these really trying times. So, you know, help others, support artists, and support local businesses as much as you can. Amazon does not need your money. So, you know, and absolutely support comedians and writers like Amy. And we do truly appreciate you coming on. It was amazing. And I can't wait to see more.
Thanks, guys. This was so fun. Thank you so much.
And thanks for listening, everybody.